I want to welcome my next speaker. He has been with me now for almost 3 years in the program. He's on every single Monday with me. He's the Executive Director of the United States Justice Foundation, retired military veteran, and fighter for the Constitution, someone who has been fighting the domestic battle. And I want to welcome to the stage my good friend Michael Connelly. Michael, come on up.
I was here about the same time last year, and I talked about the Constitution, I talked about veterans, and since that time a lot has happened, most of it bad. But we at the United States Justice Foundation we've been around for 37 years, and I'm the executive director now. I had a good friend named Gary Creed, who was executive director. He founded it, excuse me, I helped him found it, and then I became a consultant, and he ran it for about 34 years and did an outstanding job. And he got elected judge in the state of California, much to the chagrin of even the Republicans out there. Constitutional conservatives, a judge. Well, anyway, they contacted me and they said,
what part of California was he in?
San Diego County. And that's where our home office is, out in Ramona. Excuse me. And they contacted me and they said, will you meet the new executive director of the United States Justice Foundation? And I said, well, I'd be honored as long as I don't have to move to the People's Republic of California. I'm not going out there. So I'm in Canton, Texas, and I'm running the Justice Foundation. And I got to brag a little bit tonight because I want to show you what we do. This little document doesn't look like much. It's very thin, and it's just a few pages long, really. But it's a brief to the United States Supreme Court. My name is on it as Executive Director. I supervise constitutional lawyers around the country who prepare these briefs. I read them, I approve them, we submit them to the Supreme Court. What makes this one so interesting is that Clarence Thomas, as a justice of the Supreme Court for 10 years, never said a word or an oral argument, never asked a question, never made a comment, until about 3 weeks ago. And he asked a question based on our brief, quoted it in a gun control case. So we're making some headway. We're winning some of them. We've been involved in the amnesty case here in Texas going forward. We've just prepared a brief for the Supreme Court now. So that's one of the things we do. We also fight for our veterans. Coming up on Memorial Day. And then a week later, D-Day, the 72nd anniversary of the landings at Normandy. These are both very important days in our country's history, but even more important to me, to our family's history. First, Connellys that fought in a war for the United States were the American Revolution. They fought for Virginia cavalry regiments. We've had a Connelly fighting in every direct line descendant in every war since. So Memorial Day is very important. My father died in 1987. He was in World War II. I lost a son 5 years ago, a former combat medic who died of an unrelated illness. I have a son right now who is in Wiesbaden, Germany. He's a major in the U.S. Army. He has been a total of 94 months in combat since 9/11. Over 8 years of his life in combat. My youngest son is a Black Hawk helicopter pilot, so we sort of keep it in the family. D-Day, 72 years ago, my father was landing on Utah Beach, second wave. He was landing with the 87th Chemical Mortar Battalion, and they were in combat for 326 straight days. Battle of the Bulge, Hurricane Forest, you name it. I've written a book that's become a bestseller about his unit called A Mortarman, and we have copies out there of my other books, if anybody's interested in buying one. They're actually going to make a documentary out of it this summer. They've asked me to participate. Because nobody knew about the Mortarman. You heard about artillery units. You ever seen the movie Band of Brothers? Remember Carentan, where the 101st Airborne is attacking Carentan a few days after D-Day, and they show them being supported by the explosions, the artillery fire. I had some historians who contacted me about this documentary, say until they read my book, they did not know that that fire was coming from 4.2 mortars, not artillery. That's what my dad's unit battalion had, was 4.2, the biggest mortars in the world. They waded ashore, carrying those things. And each soldier had to carry 2 rounds of ammunition that weighed 25 pounds apiece. So they had, in addition to their ammo and everything else in their backpacks, they had 50 pounds of high explosives strapped to them. To alleviate some of the weight, they didn't carry any food. They carried 2 little, what they call D-bars, which would last for about 2 hours, energy-wise. And they didn't get any more for about 3 days. And they were in the Battle of the Bulge. They were at the Hurricane Forest. And they fought, and a lot of them died, and a lot of them were wounded. My dad's company, Company B, he was the first lieutenant. They were overrun 3 days after Christmas in the Battle of the Bulge. A little town they were in called Sadzot was overrun. They lost half their company, dead, wounded, or captured. Lost all their mortars, lost most of their equipment. Got together with some combat engineers that were sort of lost in the woods, and some members of the 101st Airborne who were also lost in the woods. This would be a battle of total chaos. And 1 light tank, and they counterattacked. And they took back the village, and they captured their mortars. And then they held off a Panzer division for 3 days until they were relieved. Got a call, I got an email recently, had to have it translated because it was in French. An email from a young man who lives outside the town of Sadzot. He said December 28th every year, they have a memorial for my dad's unit. That's what Memorial Day means, means to me. And now we have a situation where the head of the VA compares the waiting lines for veterans to get the health care that they earned to waiting in line at Disney.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how insensitive is this government become? Well, I can tell you how insensitive. 306,000 veterans, we've documented this, have died in the last 10 years waiting for medical care from the VA. 306,000. The new law that was passed to alleviate all that, remember, if you live over 40 miles from a VA hospital or VA clinic, you can get treated locally and the VA will pay for it. Bull. Veterans are calling me on a weekly basis, and I'll give you two examples. One has heart problems that need constant monitoring and treatment. He lives over 40 miles away from a VA hospital or clinic. He went to a local doctor, they contacted the VA and said, oh no, you can't treat him. There's a clinic within 40 miles from him. Which clinic? A dental clinic. So if there's a dental clinic within 40 miles of you, you can't treat you for heart problems. You can't get treated locally. The other one is terminal cancer. The facility 40 miles away from, less than 40 miles away from him, is a facility for booking appointments at the VA hospital 100 miles away. He can't get treatment either. There's this little thing out there called the NICS list, the National Instant Criminal Background Check List, run by the FBI. If you go to buy a firearm legally, you have to fill out a form. And if you pass the background check with the FBI, you can buy the firearm. If you don't, you can't. And a lot of veterans are finding out they can't. See, there's 3 categories of people that belong on the NICS list or go on the NICS list. Convicted felons, known drug abusers, and people who have been declared mentally ill to the point of being a danger to themselves or others, adjudicated to be mentally ill. We're working with Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa. And their committee's trying to do something about this. They were trying to do something about this in the Senate ever since we exposed it almost 3 years ago. And he did research into the NICS list. He got the FBI to release the list. Under the category of people declared mentally ill, we're talking hundreds of thousands. Under the category of the NICS list, 99.3% of the people on there are veterans. Most of them have never been to see a psychiatrist, never been adjudicated to be mentally ill. A lot of them never even knew they were on the list. And some got this little letter in the mail that said, because of your mental or physical disabilities, we're going to declare you incompetent to handle your own financial affairs. And we're going to appoint a fiduciary to represent you. You have to prove you're competent. We don't have to prove anything. We have veterans that we are representing at the United States Justice Foundation, some of them right here in Texas, that have been declared incompetent and put on this list as mentally ill because they have minor PTSD, because they have minor depression, because they let the spouses pay the family bills, or because their bills are automatically paid by their bank out of their check every month. I'm serious. We got a guy right there who lives in Canton who came to see me and showed me the paperwork. That's why they told him he was mentally ill, because he has it automatically paid. And we've been fighting these on an individual basis, winning some of them. Been trying to raise the money to a class action suit that'll cost about $250,000. And I had somebody come up the other day and give me a check for $10,000. We get a few more of those, we can start. Excuse me, I do a lot of radio talk shows, including my own, so if I start sounding like Donald Duck, just bear with me. But we're fighting on behalf of these veterans. And, you know, sometimes I hate it when I'm right. And Pastor Greg and I were talking about this earlier this evening, because I predicted this on his show, in my own show, about a year ago. Because we were starting to see the signs of what was coming. I said, you know what? They're being so successful with the veterans. Because there's well over 260,000 on the NICS list now that cannot legally purchase firearms. Well, by the way, they're also told you can't own them either. And now we're hearing from their families. The families are being contacted and said, you can't own a firearm either because you live with somebody who's been declared incompetent. So it's getting worse. And I said, you know what they're going to do? They're going to go after Social Security recipients next. 6 months ago, it came out in the Los Angeles Times that they're doing exactly that. Some members of Congress got involved in it and got word from the Social Security Administration that, yeah, it's true. We're not going to go after everybody. Right now, they're just going after people on SSI, disabled people. I've read the new regulations, the proposed regulations. They're not finalized yet. We're preparing a legal memorandum. It's one of the other things we do at the Justice Foundation. Legal memorandum to oppose them. I've read them. They're almost identical to what they're doing to the veterans. The same language. So who's next? If you're a student loan recipient, are they going to take away your right to own a firearm? Of course they are. The whole purpose is to disarm the Republic.
Yep.
To disarm the American people.
Yep.
I read a book when I was a teenager because I was fascinated by everything in World War II at that point. A book called Mein Kampf. Adolf Hitler wrote that book. He laid out his plan for taking over Germany.
Yep.
And when he was elected chancellor, he started putting his plan into effect. First thing he did, totally nationalize the healthcare system. If you control access to health care, you can control the people. Number two, disarm the German people, beginning with the veterans. Because the World War II veterans, the World War I veterans, had taken the same oath to their country, essentially, that I took to this one. To protect and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. I didn't take an oath to Barack Obama, or Nancy Pelosi, or For Paul Ryan, I took it to you, and to my country. That's what the German soldiers had done. That's why they had to be disarmed. They were disarmed. And the rest of the people passively turned in their weapons. They obeyed the law. Third thing he did was start to purge the American military, or purge the German military of their officer corps. Those officers who were not loyal personally to him, but were loyal to their oath. See, that sound familiar?
Yeah. Exactly.
We lost 13,000, just in the last year, 13,000 Army officers, captains and majors mostly, that were basically given pink slips. Didn't matter how much time they had in, how close they were to retirement. Fortunately, my oldest son has got his 20 in, and they were told, out. We have a military right now that's smaller than what we had prior to World War II.
Yeah.
If we had the same size military now that they had prior to World War II, except had it during the war, there'd been no landing on D-Day. There'd been no D-Day. We wouldn't have been able to even fight in Europe. We can't fight anybody right now, effectively. Number one, we're not allowed to do it. And rules of engagement. You don't tell soldiers to go into war, to go into battle, and not shoot at the enemy. Unless you're Barack Obama.
Exactly what they're doing.
We lost a whole squad of Marines a couple of years ago in Afghanistan. They were in a valley. They were surrounded by 700 Taliban up in the hills around them, firing down at them. They called for airstrike and artillery support. The call was routed to the White House. The person at the White House, who obviously was not military, didn't really know what an airstrike was, but he knew he had to tell them, well, you can't have it unless you can assure us that every one of those people in the hills is armed and shooting at you. You can't tell us that they're all armed, then you can't have air support for artillery. Well, they're pinned down. I could see some Marines standing up going, trying to count the number of armed men. It didn't matter. They all died. All 8 of them were overrun. The rules of engagement now are even worse. Yesterday, the Iraqis launched an attack to try to retake Fallujah. 200 Marines died to take that city, and Obama basically gave it to ISIS. They launched an attack yesterday, and we're supposed to have U.S. air support. Dozens of U.S. planes went into the air, flew to Fallujah. Only one got permission to drop his bombs, because there was a possibility of collateral damage. So a bunch of Iraqi soldiers probably got killed, just like American soldiers get killed. If I sound like I'm fed up, it's because I'm past fed up. And what's being done to our veterans right now, can't get good treatment. They're being treated like dirt. Why do we have such a shortage of staff members? Well, much of the VA budget for the last 7 years has gone to clean energy. Phoenix, Arizona, Phoenix VA. They've admitted that 40 people died there waiting for treatment. We know the number's closer to a couple of thousand. They had a shortage of doctors, they said. Why? Because $21 million had been diverted to put solar panels on one of the hospital buildings. How many doctors, 1 year's contract with $21 million to pay for? Quite a few. But that's not a priority. The VA spent thousands of dollars in Houston, Texas, putting windmills at the National Cemetery to generate energy. Why do you need energy at the National Cemetery? except for some spotlights maybe at night. But the VA, the head of the VA there also instituted new rules and regulations on American Legion posts and other groups that would hand out cards to, they'd come to every veteran funeral, and they'd hand out cards saying, God bless you. They were told you can't do that anymore. And if you are burying a loved one at the VA cemetery in Houston, Texas, before your minister, whoever is there, or chaplain, can say a prayer, they have to put it in writing and give it to me, the administrator, for my approval. And don't say God, don't say Jesus. VA Hospital in Dallas, Texas. I have a good friend named Jess Johnson, a veteran. He put together, he and his wife, their only spouse, put together years ago, because they saw that the VA hospitals, they didn't have a lot of families that were coming there to visit some of these elderly veterans. So they put together, they would bring them Christmas dinner every year, and Christmas cards, and they would give them Bibles if they wanted them, and they would bring them presents. They had to stop it this year. They were told, number one, they couldn't bring them food, outside food, because that hadn't been cleared by the chefs at the White House or whoever. Number two, they couldn't give them Christmas cards. Schools that always did this in the area were told the same thing. You cannot give them Christmas cards because they might contain a religious reference or the words Merry Christmas. You can't bring them presents because you might try to sneak something in that we don't like. So this is pretty much what we got going. And this is what this is all about. A little booklet called Our Constitution that I wrote, and I put in each article, each amendment, each section of the Constitution that's originally written, and I put in my comments about what they really mean. And what Ernest talked about a while ago was very true. One thing that people found out by reading the booklet, and I had 2 PhDs tell me this, when we read your booklet, that this word separation of church and state was not in the Constitution. Our kids don't know that. Our kids aren't being taught this. I was talking about World War II a minute ago. Lord knows what they're teaching our kids in the textbooks today. I can remember when my oldest was in high school in Baton Rouge, I looked at his history textbook. And the textbook was chock full of page after page after page about the Civil Rights Movement, an important movement, yes, about the women's rights movement, about the Industrial Revolution. World War II was covered in a page and a half. Under the Common Core rules, I've seen when they talk about World War II, they blame it on the United States. It was all our fault. We started World War II with our greed. And they talk about how what came out of World War II, the most important thing for people to remember was that how badly the black soldiers were treated. That's what they're teaching in the textbooks. That's it. None of our generals were even mentioned by name. Almost none of the battles were even mentioned by name. In Korea, forget it. I was commander of American Legion Post for 2 years in Carrollton, Texas, and recently we lost one of our last Korean War veterans. His son was supposed to go to college. We brought 7 of his friends over, and they saw the veterans Korean War without hat. And except for his grandson, none of those other kids had ever heard of the Korean War.
Oh my goodness.
These were high school seniors, had never heard of the Korean War. So we're fighting the battle. We need help. You can find out what we're doing. You can read copies of all these briefs, by the way. We've filed almost 3 dozen of them in the last 6 or 8 months. You can read those if you go to usjf.net. And I have some cards out there for the United States Justice Foundation with that address on it. You can also pick up one of my cards and go to my blog. I have a blog that has received several million hits, and where I talk about the Constitution. And you can get a card and take it to that link. I also have my own radio talk show on Wednesday at 3 o'clock Central Time. It's an hour-long show called Our Constitution. And you can get cards on all that. And if you want me to contact you whenever I post a new article on my blog, Just sign your name and email address out there on a pad we've got, and I will put you on my email list. I don't do forwards. You won't get any kind of stuff like that from me. The only thing you'll get is a notice whenever I post a new law. And I post them on issues like this, on the Constitution, on the gun rights issues. We do a lot of Second Amendment work. We do a lot of First Amendment work. And Pastor Gray mentioned that a while ago. That's getting more and more critical. Freedom of religion, just, forget it. That's going to the wayside. And you can also find the books out there. If you want to buy a copy of our Constitution, it's $5. And then my book about my dad's units there. And then there's a patriotic novel, which the liberals absolutely hate. And they attack it constantly on Amazon, which makes me feel so good. I love it and take them off. And I just sent Pastor Greg a new novel that'll be coming out later this summer that I've written, and he's going to review it for me. And then I got 2 books that are just kind of fun books. If you have sons and grandsons in Boy Scouts, there's a book called Riders in the Sky that goes to Legends of Philmont Scout Ranch that's out there. And so, anyway, that helps us pay for some things. The main thing is, if you would like to donate to the United States Justice Foundation, we can take it out there. You can write a check to USJF, and that check will go to help the veterans cases we're working on, along with the fact that we're also involved in Little Sisters of the Poor case. We're going to be involved in the transgender bathroom business. We're working right now with a state senator here in Texas on some extremely important immigration legislation. Extremely. Can't tell you more about it at this point, but it's being worked on by more than 3 or 4 different states, and they've got us as the point guards on this. So thank you very much for having me tonight, and if you have some questions, I can try to answer them.
If you have any questions, go ahead and come to the orange mic right over here, and we'll be happy to take them. Just come on to the orange mic right here. And I just encourage you to support him back there at the table, too, because there are some great books back there I think you will really enjoy. The Borderman is an amazing story of bravery, and no one has heard that story. And it's such a shame. Isn't it a shame? We have an entire generation that is growing up hearing that all there is to know about America is that we're bad. That's it. That's all they're hearing. America's bad. America stole from the Indians. America has always mistreated people of color. And America was an imperialist, opportunistic nation that fought wars in order to enrich its bank accounts. What a shame.
Looks like we don't have any questions.
All
It's
right.
nice to be so brilliant that nobody has questions. Usually somebody comes up, at least call me and tell me I'm done as a box of rocks. Anyway, thank you very much for having me.
Oh, one question.
I have one question. My name's Angela Smith. I'm from Fredericksburg. When you speak about some of these things that are happening within our hospitals, within our schools, when do we get to the point where we boycott, if you will, i.e. civil disobedience? Because at some point, the line has to be drawn, and we're going to have to draw it, or we continue just being the nice guy and going along and keeping the peace to our own detriment. So what is your opinion on that? I don't know. I know at USJF probably doesn't talk about that a lot, but those incidences that are happening are just getting more common. And I honestly believe why people are sending their kids to a public school, it just shocks me. I have no idea. I have a 21-year-old. He went to a public school for a little while. Thank God he's almost finished with all this. But if I had little ones, there'd be no way they'd be going. We'd be looking for opportunities, and there are plenty of them out there. So that's just one instance. But you're talking about these hospitals where they can't bring a Bible anymore, they can't bring the food and their gifts and all that. I mean, I'd just say, sorry guys, but I'm walking in. And you'll take me to jail before I go along with that anymore. So I don't know what your opinions might be on that kind of thing.
Well, we do at the United States Justice Foundation, what we can do as a nonprofit And by the way, we're 501c3, so we can make a contribution to us as tax deductible. We do two things: education, to let people know about these problems. Every time I go to a meeting like this, and I do them, if anybody wants me to come to a meeting of your group, I also speak about this veteran situation at Lions Clubs, Rotary Clubs, all kinds of groups. Every time I go to a meeting, 90% of the people have never heard of this, don't know this is happening. And that's because there's been very little publicity about it. Those that have tried to publicize it have been attacked. The Daily Caller wrote a major story about it. A California online newspaper wrote a major story about it based on what we were saying. But that's about it. And like I said, I do a lot of radio talk shows on the subject. So we're trying to get the word out on that and other issues. We're fighting in court every step of the way. But I can tell you this from a personal standpoint, there are a lot of really angry people out there right now. Many of them veterans. There are 23 million of us. Some have gone underground. Some are preparing to fight. So there's a growing surge out there to be prepared. And I said in one of my law colleagues, right, I said, we're about to reach the point where it's going to be lock and load.
Yep.
And, my latest column called Brace Yourselves. You read that because, again, I'm afraid I might be right.
And you can reach Michael's blog through my website as well. It's really easy. Just go to pastorgregyoung.org, scroll over blog, you'll see the drop down, and you can pick up Michael's articles. You can also get Megan Barth's articles as well, reaganbaby.com. You can get Don Jans. Don Jans writes just about every day about different issues that are going on. Very insightful stuff. So I encourage you to go to the website and click on the blog links. Paul?
Does your organization deal with issues with veterans on disability issues?
We are doing some general work on that disability issue, where we are representing some veterans, an individual, helping them file appeals and this sort of thing. It's not really a constitutional issue, though. It's determining whether or not someone is disabled and needs to get VA care. That's more a civil thing, and that's usually done by a VA attorney. We don't really have the capability to do that. What we're trying to do is make sure that the opportunities are available to all veterans to get the care they need from the VA. So we're more or less going after the VA in general on that, and specifically on constitutional issues like Second Amendment. But if you know somebody who has a problem, if you have a problem, email me. Use my card. Email me, and we can help you prepare an appeal possibly.
That has been done. That's been done a year ago.
Okay.
I never got it.
Send me copies of your medical records, and we'll take a look at it. And I'll make some recommendations to you, because we're doing that for a lot of veterans.
Last question. Go ahead, John.
Hello, I'm, can you hear me?
Yep.
I'm Jonathan Johnson. I have more of a suggestion more than a question. One of the things that during the Cold War years, one of the programs that the communists would use, one of their strategies in the Eastern Bloc nations would be to try to erase cultural memories of in Hungary and Czechoslovakia, expunge memories of the prior generations in the past, sort of like what the progressives are doing here in our country. I guess most everybody here has grandchildren, nephews, nieces. As a countermeasure or an antidote, you might talk with your grandchildren and even neighborhood children and try to make history real to them. And what I mean to say by making history real is, I'll give you an example. I took an old, I had an uncle years ago in the 1950s, made a typewritten genealogy of all the people going back 200 years, 300 years. And I got on Ancestry.com and followed it back, and it was pretty accurate. I found out that I had an ancestor that starved to death at Valley Forge. Another ancestor was a school teacher in 1861 when he signed up for the Iowa Volunteer Militia, or infantry rather. And I had other people that posted narratives about they could have been stories right out of Daniel Boone. And what I'm saying is anybody can do this, and take your young grandson or granddaughter and say, hey, your great-grandfather or great-grandmother or an uncle was a part of history and everything. And there are caveats. I have one distant relationship to an old West outlaw, but when you roll the dice, that's what you get. But
John, do you have any question of any sort?
that's all.
Okay.
That's all.
We, my late wife and I, we used to take our kids on vacations and always stop along the way at a historical site we passed. And we always felt like they learned more from those trips than they ever learned from the history books. But think about the challenge here, and I'll conclude with this. Last week, an airplane was brought down, probably by terrorism. ISIS continues to advance around the world. The American economy is struggling. Millions of people are without jobs. Veterans can't get medical care. Veterans are being denied their right to keep and bear arms, as are senior citizens. What was Congress's top priority last week, including Republicans? To ban the Confederate flag.
It's a battle flag.
To ban the Confederate flag. Thank you.
Michael, thank you. Give Michael a hand. Really good.